I woke up to the sound of my son's tiny feet padding into our bedroom. It was barely 6:30 a.m., and the Sacramento sunlight was already glowing through the blinds, painting faint stripes across the bed. My wife, Laura, stirred next to me and groaned, burying her face into the pillow. It was my cue. I rolled out of bed carefully, so as not to jostle her, and scooped up 3-year-old Ethan before he could climb onto his mother and fully rouse her from the last moments of her sleep. "Daddy, cereal!" Ethan demanded in a half-whisper, his eyes still puffy with sleep but brimming with morning energy. In the nursery down the hall, I could hear his baby sister Emma babbling, just starting to wake. Our weekday routine was in full swing already. "All right, buddy, let's get you some breakfast," I said softly. I glanced back at Laura's form under the duvet, a tangle of chestnut hair on the pillow, an arm stretched across to where I had been. She worked late last night, or so she told me. Some product release crunch at her tech startup that kept her at the office until almost midnight. I didn't press for details. She looked exhausted when she finally slid into bed beside me sometime after I'd fallen asleep. It wasn't unusual lately. Downstairs, I set Ethan up at the kitchen island with a bowl of his favorite cereal and a sliced banana. The modern kitchen gleamed around us. White marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, the kind of kitchen we always dreamed of having. Our townhouse was only a few years old, part of a new development in a nice neighborhood on the east side of Sacramento. Not quite the suburbs, but far enough from downtown that we had a small community park and quiet streets. We'd moved in shortly after Emma was born, upgrading from our old apartment to have more space for the growing family. I poured myself a cup of coffee, savoring the first sip. Mornings were often the only calm period of my day. As an operations manager for a local energy company, my work life was a cycle of meetings, project deadlines, and the occasional crisis when power systems malfunctioned. I enjoyed the challenge, though, ensuring homes and businesses kept their lights on and the air conditioning running in the sweltering Sacramento summers. It was a job that required planning and risk management, skills I prided myself on. Through the kitchen's open archway, I could see into the living room where toys were strewn about. A plastic fire truck, a scatter of Lego pieces on the rug, the chaos of a young family. I often thought of it as a happy chaos. I leaned against the counter for a moment, sipping my coffee, watching Ethan pick out the banana slices and line them up on the rim of his bowl. These were the small moments that grounded me. Soon enough, I heard Laura upstairs, her footsteps quick and light as she moved around getting ready. Our morning coordination was like a well-practiced dance by now. I'd take care of breakfast and getting the kids dressed while she got herself ready for work. Then we'd swap. I'd dress and she'd handle last-minute kiddo needs. And we'd both be out the door to our respective jobs. "Morning," Laura greeted me as she came into the kitchen, smoothing the front of her blouse. She was already dressed in a crisp navy pantsuit, the outfit striking against her auburn hair, which she had twisted up into a quick clip. Her eyes still looked a bit tired, but she gave me a small smile as she went straight for the coffee pot. "Morning," I replied, returning the smile. Despite the early hour and the grogginess, seeing her always gave me a warm familiarity, the curve of that smile, the light scent of her floral perfume as she passed by, the way she absent-mindedly adjusted Ethan's collar as she joined us at the island. "Big day today?" I asked, reaching over to wipe a drop of milk off Ethan's chin. Laura blew on her coffee. "Kind of. We have a product team stand-up, and I need to present the timeline for the app update rollout to the execs." She took a careful sip. "And I might have a late meeting with a user group from New York, time zones and all that." I nodded. Lately, Laura's schedule at the tech startup had been intense. She was a product manager at a SaaS company that developed project management tools. Ironically, tools to help other teams coordinate and schedule their time better. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that her own job managing those products often demanded irregular hours. "You were out cold when I got in last night," she said, giving me an apologetic half-smile over her mug. "Sorry I woke you up." "It's okay. I barely remember it," I lied casually. The truth was I'd woken enough to register her slipping into bed, the cool air coming in under the sheets as she settled. I did recall the clock reading something like 12:30 a.m. I also recalled the vague scent of, was it eucalyptus? Something herbal and earthy clinging to her. Probably the yoga studio's signature scent. She often attended yoga classes after work to unwind on particularly stressful days. How was your yoga class? I asked, reaching to pop some bread in the toaster for my own breakfast. Laura paused mid-sip, and for a second her green eyes flicked toward me over the rim of the mug. Hmm? Oh, it was fine, she answered lightly. Helped me relax after all that time at the computer. I stirred a bit of honey into my coffee, keeping my expression neutral. She'd mentioned a yoga class, which made sense. She used to frequent a boutique yoga studio downtown a lot last year, though she had told me she canceled that expensive membership when she started going to a more affordable gym near our house. She'd said she found a local place that offered good yoga sessions, along with general workout equipment, and it was easier to fit into her routine. I hadn't thought about that in a while, but now that she brought up yoga, I realized it had been some time since I heard her talk about the local gym's classes. Instead, I'd mostly heard about crunch times at work. Maybe last night she'd decided to drop in at her old studio after the late meeting. Or perhaps the gym had a late yoga session. Either way, it wasn't something to interrogate. A late work night followed by a calming yoga stretch was plausible. I shrugged it off. The toast popped. I busied myself buttering it and making a small cheese toast for Ethan to nibble now that he'd finished devouring the bananas. We continued the small talk about our days ahead. I told her I had a midday meeting with city regulators. She reminded me she'd be home a bit late again due to that New York call. It was all very domestic and ordinary. Just a normal weekday morning in the Warren household. By 7:45, we had the kids dressed. Ethan proudly sporting his favorite t-shirt with a cartoon robot, and Emma wriggling in her floral onesie as Laura buckled her into the car seat. I grabbed my laptop bag and double-checked that Ethan's daycare bag had his sun hat for the playground. Sacramento's June weather was already climbing into the 80s by midday. Sunscreen and hats were a must. I'll pick up the kids today since you'll be on that call, I said as we stepped out into the garage. We had a two-car arrangement. My reliable hybrid sedan and her sporty electric car, both plugged into the outlet overnight. The neighborhood was still quiet except for a few sprinklers whirring to life on nearby lawns. Laura opened the driver door of her car, then hesitated. She looked over the roof at me as I secured Emma's seat base into my car. Thanks, hun. I should be done by 7, hopefully. I can swing by my mom's after work tomorrow to pick up the kids so you can stay a bit later at the office if you need to catch up on your stuff. I straightened up and gave her a grateful smile. That'd be great. I do have a backlog to plow through. We often did this. A balancing act of schedules, handing off kid duties to let the other catch up with work when needed. It felt equal, a team effort. It had to be, with both of us having careers that could be demanding. I walked around to her and leaned in to give her a quick kiss. Good luck with the execs today. You'll do great. She smiled against my cheek. Thanks. Love you. Love you too, I replied. And I meant it. Despite the crazy schedules and the tiredness and the routine of it all, I loved my wife. We had built a good life together here in Sacramento. A life that, at that moment, I believed was happy, stable, and secure. As I got into my own car and watched her pull out ahead, I never imagined that this ordinary morning would be one of the last truly normal moments in our lives for a long time. If I'd known what was brewing beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect routine, perhaps I would have savored that morning a little more. Perhaps I would have looked a bit closer at the passing comment about yoga, at the tiredness in her eyes, at the subtle changes that had been creeping into our lives. But I didn't know. Not yet. I started the car and the radio blared on, a morning news segment about local water restrictions. I clicked it off, preferring the quiet. In the rearview mirror, Ethan was already flipping through a picture book, and Emma cooed, clutching her plush bunny. The sun was fully up now, golden and promising against a clear blue California sky. I took a deep breath and backed out of the driveway, ready to face another day, blissfully unaware of how everything was about to change. Chapter 2. Unexpected Expenses. It was late on a Tuesday night about a week later, after the kids had finally gone to bed, when I sat down at the desk in our small home office corner to tackle some bills. The house was quiet. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant rush of cars on the nearby boulevard filtering through the open window. Laura was downstairs in the living room, curled up on the couch with her tablet, presumably catching up on some work emails or maybe streaming a show. We had said our goodnights earlier, each retreating to our own tasks once the kids were asleep. I navigated to the American Express website to check our family credit card statement. We put most household expenses on that Amex and paid it off monthly, so I routinely reviewed each charge line by line. Scrolling through the recent transactions, I muttered softly to myself as I verified the usual suspects: grocery store, gas station, Ethan's preschool tuition payment, a Target run, probably diapers and snacks, courtesy of Laura, a restaurant charge from last Friday when we ordered takeout. All ordinary. But then I paused, my eyes snagging on a line that didn't immediately make sense. Airbnb, $130, Sacramento, CA, date June 14th, 11:48 p.m. I blinked at it. Sacramento, CA, our city, and nearly midnight? We hadn't traveled anywhere, certainly not locally. Why would we have an Airbnb charge in our own city, and at that hour? For a moment, I wondered if perhaps it was a mix-up. Maybe we bought something and the merchant used some odd billing method that made it look like Airbnb. Or could someone have gotten our card info? Fraud wasn't unheard of. I made a mental note to check if any other strange charges appeared. I scrolled further. Another charge, a week prior. Airbnb, $1,250, Sacramento, CA. Date, June 7th, 12:20 a.m. My heart rate picked up slightly. Two separate Airbnb charges, both around midnight, both in Sacramento. We definitely hadn't been staying anywhere overnight on those dates. On June 7th, if I recalled correctly, Laura had said she was having a girls' night with her old college friend who was visiting town. She'd come home the next morning looking a bit groggy, claiming they had polished off a second bottle of wine and she'd crashed at her friend's hotel to avoid driving. At the time, it sounded perfectly reasonable. I'd spent that evening at home with the kids, even texting her a photo of Ethan asleep on the couch with half a peanut butter sandwich in hand, which she'd heart-reacted to. I remember she called me briefly around 10 p.m. to say goodnight. Everything had seemed fine. If she stayed at a hotel with her friend, why would there be an Airbnb charge? Unless they didn't stay at a hotel at all. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen. A cold, uneasy feeling crept into my stomach. I forced myself to keep scrolling the statement. Among the transactions, another unfamiliar item jumped out in repetition. Yoga Pass Pro subscription, $89.99, date June 1st, and another on May 1st and April 1st, a monthly recurring charge. Yoga Pass Pro. It took me a second, but then I recognized the name. It was some premium online yoga platform or service. I vaguely remember Laura mentioning it once last year, something about a free trial for guided sessions. But that was before she joined the local gym. She had explicitly told me she canceled any fancy yoga subscriptions because her new gym membership covered classes and we were tightening the budget after buying the townhouse. Yet here it was, nearly $90 every month for at least the last 3 months that I could see, maybe more if I scrolled further back. I felt a prickling at the back of my neck. None of this made sense in the context of what I believed about our life. Why would she still be paying for Yoga Pass Pro when she had a gym membership? Was she even using the gym? I tried to recall the last time she mentioned going there specifically. Lately, whenever she talked about workouts or yoga, it was always kind of in passing or tied to work stress, like, I needed to hit the mat after that long day. Did I just assume she meant the gym nearby? Maybe she quietly reactivated some premium membership and didn't mention it, thinking I'd be annoyed at the cost. That didn't quite sit right. Laura wasn't the type to hide spending. We had a pretty open financial life, shared accounts, joint decisions on big purchases. A nearly $100 a month charge wouldn't go unnoticed normally. I would have spotted it sooner had I not been a bit lax about going through each item until now. The last couple of months had been hectic, and I realized I had set the credit card to auto-pay without my usual thorough review. Now I regretted that lapse. I swallowed, feeling my mouth dry. Okay, I told myself, don't jump to conclusions. There could be explanations. The Airbnb charges, maybe she booked a place for that friend visiting. But why in Sacramento and not a hotel? And why 2 separate nights? The thought that she might have done it more than twice niggled at me. I scrolled back further through earlier statements. Sure enough, in May's statement, Airbnb, $118, Sacramento, CA, date May 24th, 11:15 p.m. And in April, Airbnb, $130.50, Sacramento, CA, date April 9th, 11:30 p.m. My fingers drummed anxiously on the desk. April 9th, May 24th, June 7th, June 14th. Roughly bi-weekly, not a perfectly regular interval, but all late-night, one-night bookings in town. My mind raced as I realized each of these dates corresponded with an excuse or story Laura had given me. The early April charge occurred while I was away at a conference. She was home alone with the kids that week, free to do as she pleased. The late May booking? I remembered I'd been out at a basketball game with a friend that night. She'd later claimed she fell asleep in the nursery with the baby, which, at the time, I didn't question. June 7th was the supposed girls' night with her visiting friend. And June 14, she had told me she worked so late on a project that she crashed at the company's overnight apartment and came home the next morning with pastries from an early meeting. In isolation, each excuse had felt plausible. Now, viewed together against these charges, they formed a damning pattern. I realized I was gripping the sides of the laptop, my knuckles white. My mind kept circling back to one horrifying possibility. Was Laura meeting someone during those times? The idea of an affair, of infidelity, had never seriously entered my mind before. We'd been married 8 years, and I had complete trust in her. Or so I thought. Sure, the passion of our 20s had mellowed into the domestic rhythm of our 30s, but I never felt unloved or suspicious. We had occasional squabbles, the usual disagreements about chores or schedules, but nothing major. We still cuddled on the couch on weekends, had date nights when we could snag a sitter, made love when we weren't utterly exhausted from work and parenting. Nothing screamed that she was unhappy or that our relationship was in trouble. Yet, here were these charges. If they were what I feared, she might have been using that Yoga Pass Pro as a cover or an excuse, and those Airbnbs as rendezvous points with someone. A lover? The mere notion made my stomach churn and a rush of anger mixed with panic rise in my chest. Calm down, Mark, I urged myself. It could still be something else. Maybe she was planning surprise getaways for us that fell through. Or helping a cousin who needed a place to stay. Or, hell, were there any relatives or friends in trouble around those times? I couldn't think of any. I needed clarity. And the fastest way to get it would be to simply ask her. But a direct confrontation out of the blue could backfire if I was wrong. Or even if I was right. I glanced at the clock on my laptop. 11:05 p.m. Laura was still downstairs. I could faintly hear the murmur of the TV or her tablet playing something. I decided to start subtly. I picked up my phone and sent her a text. Sometimes it was easier to text if she had headphones on, and I didn't want to startle her by calling out. Hey, I'm reviewing the Amex. What's this Airbnb charge on June 14? Did we book something that I forgot about? Downstairs, I heard the muffled buzz of her phone on the coffee table. A pause, then her voice called up lightly. Mark, you're looking at the credit card? There's something weird? I walked out of the office and leaned over the upstairs banister. From there, I could see her head perk up from the couch. She muted the TV. Yeah, I said, keeping my tone casual. There are a couple charges I don't recognize. One is an Airbnb in Essac last week. Did you maybe book something for one of your work people or for your mom and forget to mention it? There was a brief silence where she just looked at me. Even from afar, I sensed a flicker of alarm in her posture. Her back got a little straighter, her shoulders tensed. Or perhaps I was projecting my own anxiety. It was dim downstairs, the only light coming from the TV and a floor lamp. Oh, that, she said, a second too late to sound completely nonchalant. That was, actually me helping out Jenna. You remember Jenna, my friend from yoga? The one who moved to San Francisco? I vaguely recalled a Jenna from her old yoga class circle. Sure, okay. I didn't respond, waiting for her to elaborate. She was in town last week unexpectedly, and it was too late for her to drive back to the city. All the hotels near downtown were booked up because of some convention, Laura said, speaking a touch quickly. So I helped her get an Airbnb for the night. She didn't have the app, and, I figured I'd book it on our account, and she paid me back via Venmo. I totally forgot to tell you, sorry. I should have used her card, but it was just faster to do mine. She gave a small, apologetic laugh. I can forward you the Venmo if you want to see. It might not have been the exact same amount, I think I told her. Just give me $130 even, and I'd cover the difference for the cleaning fee as a treat, since we hadn't seen each other in so long. Her explanation flowed out smoothly enough, and she even managed an embarrassed chuckle at the end, as if she were caught in a harmless little omission. It was actually a decent explanation fitting neatly with the charge amount and context. If I hadn't been primed with suspicion, it might have satisfied me completely. But I was primed. I leaned on the banister, trying to keep my face impassive in the half-light. I see. I might have missed the Venmo going in, I said. No biggie. And the one on June 7? There's another Airbnb that week too. Laura actually frowned, as if concentrating. June 7th? Oh, that might have been the one I booked for my friend Alyssa's bachelorette thing. Remember, I told you I helped them reserve a place by the river for a night? They all paid me back later. I guess that one ended up on our card too. I'm sorry, I've been meaning to do a proper reconciliation of those things. There were a lot of little transactions. She stood up now and stretched as if this conversation was only mildly concerning. She was playing it off well. I should really be better about separating those expenses. I can send you what they paid me back if you want to check it against the charges. She started up the stairs, coming toward me, all casual innocence. In the dim light of the hallway, I saw her face clearly as she reached me. It had that open, earnest look, eyebrows slightly raised in an expression of, sorry if I messed up. She leaned in and gave me a quick peck on the lips. Thanks for catching that, hun. I'll make sure to put stuff on my personal card when I'm helping friends out so it doesn't confuse our budget. I swallowed and nodded, sliding my phone into my pocket so she wouldn't notice my slightly trembling hand. Her breath smelled faintly of the herbal tea she'd been drinking. Up close, she looked normal. Tired, yes, but there was nothing in those eyes that screamed liar. If she was lying, she was doing an incredible job of acting like she wasn't. What about the Yoga Pass Pro? I hadn't mentioned that yet. Her quick explanations for the Airbnbs had thrown me off balance. I didn't fully buy them, but I also didn't have a concrete reason not to, aside from a gut feeling. Bringing up the Yoga Pass might push this conversation into territory I wasn't ready for. If she had a ready answer for that too, it might just turn into an argument about why I was scrutinizing her every expense. I realized I didn't want to tip my hand that I was suspicious. Not until I had more than a gut feeling in some odd transactions. Okay, I said slowly. As long as you got reimbursed. Maybe just make a note so we remember next time. I was just concerned our card was compromised or something. Totally, I get it. She placed a hand on my arm. It was nice of you to double-check. We'd definitely want to catch fraud if it was that. But this was just me being scatterbrained and generous to friends. She gave me a wry smile. I forced a small smile back. All right, I'm going to finish up here. See you in bed soon. Sure, I'll be up in a few minutes, she said, already turning to head into the kitchen, perhaps to put her mug away. I watched her walk away, the soft halo of the kitchen light briefly illuminating her profile as she rinsed her cup. Nothing about her demeanor seemed off now. If anything, I felt like the one sneaking around, peering into corners of our life that I usually trusted her with. Back at the laptop, I sat down and exhaled slowly. She had an answer for the Airbnbs. Maybe they were rehearsed answers, but how could she have known I'd ask tonight? More likely, she came up with those on the fly if she was lying at all. And if she wasn't lying, then I was just being paranoid, ready to suspect my wife of something awful over a couple of poorly communicated expenses. Yet my gut still twisted with unease. Because even if I accepted her Airbnb stories, there was still the Yoga Pass Pro charges. Why wouldn't she mention that? That couldn't be for a friend's benefit. That had to be for her. The simplest reason for not telling me about resubscribing to a pricey yoga service would be that she knew I'd question it, maybe get a little annoyed at the cost. But it wasn't some huge betrayal to spend money on fitness, so why hide it? Unless the yoga subscription itself was a cover for something else entirely. A cover for meeting a particular yoga instructor, perhaps? A memory flashed unbidden. About 6 months ago, during the holidays, Laura had dragged me to a couple's yoga session at her old boutique studio. What was the instructor's name? Alex, I think. A tall, charming guy with a man bun and a New Zealand accent, who had joked that I was stiff as a surfboard. After class, Laura had gushed about how fantastic of a teacher Alex was, how much he'd helped her improve her form in just a few months she'd been attending. I recalled teasing her the tiniest bit about her yoga crush, and she smacked my arm playfully and said, "Oh, please, he's like 10 years younger and has a girlfriend. Besides, you're the only stiff surfboard I need." We had laughed. It had seemed utterly innocent. Now that memory took on a more sinister cast in my mind, She'd been very invested in those classes until abruptly she wasn't, claiming the cost was too high. If she had restarted a subscription or membership, perhaps it was to see someone. Maybe Alex? I felt a surge of jealousy and fear at the thought. I realized I didn't actually know what happened to Alex. Did he move? Did he start teaching elsewhere? If he was the kind of person unscrupulous enough to seduce a married client, wait, why was I filling in all these blanks with the worst-case scenario? I rubbed my temples. This was dangerous mental territory full of conjecture. I needed facts. If Laura was lying, she had already shown she could do it smoothly without blinking. I wouldn't get the truth by asking her directly. Not yet, anyway. I needed evidence. Hard evidence, something that couldn't be explained away with a quick story. The credit card statement was just smoke. I needed to find the fire. I shut down the laptop and got ready for bed, my mind racing with possibilities. When I slid under the covers next to Laura, she murmured sleepily and shifted closer, draping an arm over me as she often did. Her warmth against me used to be comforting. Tonight it felt almost surreal, like I was lying next to a stranger wearing my wife's skin. I lay awake for a long time after her breathing slowed into the long, steady rhythm of sleep, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Somewhere in those restless hours, I made up my mind. I would not accuse her of anything until I knew for sure what was going on. But I also would not ignore the signs. If there was something to be uncovered, I was going to uncover it. Little did I know how quickly the opportunity for that would come. Chapter 3. Accidental. Access to the laptop. The opportunity to dig deeper came sooner than I expected. Just a few days after I first noticed those suspicious charges, Laura announced over dinner that she had to take an overnight trip down to Palo Alto for a series of back-to-back meetings with a potential client. It wasn't unusual. Her startup was courting a big enterprise contract, and she'd been talking about this on-site visit for a week. She'd leave early Wednesday morning and be back late Thursday night. On Wednesday evening, after putting the kids to bed solo and tidying up the kitchen, I walked into our upstairs study to grab some documents I needed to review for work. As I flicked on the light, I noticed the soft whirring sound of a computer fan. Laura's MacBook was sitting on the desk, screen still on. She must have forgotten to shut it down before she left. I approached it, noting that the screen hadn't gone to sleep because a browser window was open. And in that window, filling the screen, was her Gmail inbox. I froze for a moment at the threshold between the door and the desk. The laptop was like an animal that had wandered into a trap, completely unwitting. It was her personal email account, one we both used on occasion to send each other cute photos of the kids or coordinate on family events. I had the password saved on my phone as well. We had shared a few passwords in a moment of marital pragmatism years ago for emergency access. But I never logged into her email. There was never a need or a desire to snoop, until now. The inbox looked ordinary at a glance. A promotional email from a clothing store, a note from her mother about weekend plans, some unread newsletters. But what caught my eye was the sidebar. Among the usual system labels like inbox, sent, trash, there was a custom label that stood out, VIP. It was capitalized just like that with a little star icon next to it. I knew Laura had labels for work, for receipts, for stuff related to the kids' school, etc., but I had never seen a VIP label before, and it had a number next to it, 8, indicating 8 unread or maybe total messages in that category. My heart thumped. VIP? It could be anything. Could be something for work, maybe shorthand for very important person, or some special project. But what if it was where she was funneling emails she didn't want easily seen? Maybe correspondence with someone she considered a VIP in her life, someone secret. I stepped closer, drawn to the glow of the screen like a moth. My mind raced. I could click it right now, read whatever was there. The laptop was already logged in, a doorway into her private world wide open in front of me. I reached out, finger trembling slightly over the trackpad, but then I stopped. If I clicked on that label, those emails would be marked as read, possibly tipping her off that someone had seen them. Even if I tried to mark them unread again, I might miss one or change a state. And if she were truly hiding something, she might have set up alerts or at least mentally kept track of what's unread. No, I needed to be smarter. I needed a way to retrieve everything without leaving footprints. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering with a mix of guilt and adrenaline. Ethically, this was a gray area at best, snooping through my wife's personal emails. But I felt beyond the luxury of scruples now. I was driven by the gnawing need to know the truth. If I was wrong, if this was all a big misunderstanding, then I'd deal with the guilt of invading her privacy. If I was right, well, then any method was justified to uncover it. I recalled something I'd read a while back about downloading your own Google data. Google Takeout, they called it. A service to export all your information. If I could quietly export her mailbox, I could comb through it at my leisure without changing anything in her live account. Without further hesitation, I gently sat down at the desk and touched the trackpad to wake it fully. The Gmail tab was open, as was another tab with some travel information, likely her flight details for this trip. I clicked open a new tab and typed Google Takeout into the search bar. Within seconds, I was on the Google Takeout page, which, thanks to her being logged in, recognized her account. I navigated through the options, selecting only Gmail for export. There was an option to choose specific labels, but I opted for the entire mailbox. I wasn't going to cherry pick. I wanted everything. There was an option for the format. By default, it would create a mbox archive. That was fine. I set the delivery method to download link via email, which would send an email when the export was ready. Shit. An email. That would go straight to her inbox, possibly alerting her. I grimaced and quickly adjusted the settings. Instead, I set it to upload to a Google Drive. It offered to use her drive or allow me to select another. Using hers would again notify her. I canceled out, thinking fast. Plan B. Use an external drive and a local mail client. Perhaps I could quickly sync her mailbox offline using a mail program, but that might require adding her account with a password. I doubted I knew her current Gmail password by heart. She'd changed some passwords after a data breach scare last year, and I didn't have the new one memorized. I went back to takeout settings and looked more carefully. There was an option to download directly without emailing. Actually, no. Google's interface insisted it would email a link no matter what if I tried to do it directly. Unless, I recalled that sometimes the email goes to the account performing the export. But here I was, logged in as her. What if I quickly added my own email as a contact for the export? That might not be possible within this UI. Damn it. A simpler idea struck me. Just use the fact that her Gmail was open. I could manually search and forward some key emails to myself or copy them to a USB. But without knowing what to search for, I'd be poking around aimlessly. I tapped my fingers, anxious about the time. She was away until tomorrow night, so I had at least 24 hours. But the sooner I started, the better. Then I realized another potential route. Her MacBook likely had Apple Mail or some email client configured. If she had her Gmail set up on Apple Mail, I might find the emails synced there, which I could then simply copy or screenshot. I clicked the Finder and searched for the Mail application. It opened, and, to my luck, her Gmail account was indeed connected through it. Perhaps she used it occasionally. However, it looked like the mail hadn't fully synced recently. I saw emails up to a week ago in the inbox, and then it stopped. Possibly she normally used the web interface and the Mail app only updated when opened. I triggered a Get All New Mail in the Mail app. It began pulling in messages, including older ones, as it synced the entire account. I held my breath. This might mark messages as read on the server, depending on the protocol. But if it's IMAP, which Gmail uses, just downloading shouldn't mark them read. And the ones in the VIP label, would they sync? Possibly, if the label was recognized as a folder. Moments passed. The Mail app showed progress, downloading hundreds, then thousands of messages from the server. I saw the VIP folder appear under the Gmail label section in the client. Unread counts next to them. Good. It was late, pushing past midnight, but I felt no fatigue at all, just a sharpened focus. I let the sync continue, watching the network activity indicator spin. Once it looked complete, the activity had ceased and all messages appeared loaded up to the current date. I quickly went to the Mail app's preferences and switched it to work offline to make sure no further sync or changes would accidentally upload anything to Gmail. Now, with everything offline and static, I navigated to that VIP folder in the Mail client. It showed 8 messages total, 8 unread, as indicated by the count I saw on Gmail. They were listed by subject line and sender. My breath caught as I read the sender names and subjects at a glance. There were a few from someone named Alex R., a couple from an email that looked like a Gmail but with no name, and one with a subject, missing you, pic attached, and another, tonight. My pulse pounded in my ears. Alex, a familiar name. I clicked on the first one, dated maybe 4 months ago, in March. It opened, revealing a short message and indeed, a photo attachment thumbnail in line. The text said something like, "You were incredible today. Already counting down to next Thursday. A? X?" Numbly, I double-clicked the photo attachment icon. A high-resolution image filled the screen, and my stomach lurched as if I'd been punched from the inside. It was Laura's selfies. A man's hand was also visible in the picture. I didn't recognize the furnishings. Definitely not our bedroom. A hotel or Airbnb, I thought, with cold certainty. I jerked back as if the image had burned me and slammed the laptop shut. My hands shook uncontrollably as I leaned on the desk. This was it. Indisputable proof. My wife was having an affair. Chapter 4. Hidden folder in Gmail. I stood up abruptly, pacing the small office. My chest heaved, and I let out a strangled, soundless cry, covering my mouth lest I wake the kids or alert the neighbors. I felt like I might break something. Images of Laura and that man flashed behind my eyelids every time I blinked. This was worse than anything I had imagined. It was like my life had bifurcated into a before and after, and I was definitely in the after now, the part where nothing would ever be the same. After a few minutes, the initial storm of emotion settled into a grim, icy resolve. I needed to gather all of this, for answers, for confrontation, and yes, for leverage. I hated that my mind already jumped to leverage, but the practical part of me was taking over to protect myself and the kids. I opened the laptop again, the screen reawakening to the mail app. I methodically saved every incriminating photo to a new folder on the desktop. There were 5 pictures in total under the VIP emails, including the ones I glimpsed. I also noted the text of each email, though they were mostly brief rendezvous arrangements or compliments, many laced with an intimacy that made my skin crawl. One email from Alex R. had been a longer letter around New Year's, waxing poetic about how meeting her had changed his life's direction and how he cherished their secret. Disgust filled me. Whether his words were genuine or just manipulation, I couldn't tell, and it didn't really matter. The fact was my wife had a lover, and a fairly ardent one at that. I then looked beyond the VIP label, wondering if there were other communications elsewhere. A quick search in the mail app for Alex and for that Gmail address revealed a few more hits outside the VIP folder, some automated calendar invites, and a receipt for something called Yoga Pass Pro, one-to-one session with Alex, $200, dated not long ago. Interesting. So the Yoga Pass Pro wasn't just a generic subscription. It looked like a platform for booking private sessions, likely with him. She'd been paying for sessions with Alex. Perhaps that's how she rationalized the expense if she ever thought about it. It's for private yoga lessons. Not admitting the real nature of those lessons, I forwarded the receipt email to myself at my personal email just to have even that detail saved off. As I compiled all this evidence, a cold clarity settled over me. I would need it organized. It wasn't enough to have a folder of random files. I wanted a cohesive dossier that could tell the story clearly to any outside observer, be it a lawyer, a judge, or, as my vengeful imagination briefly considered, her employer. I opened a PDF application on her Mac. Preview would do for assembling PDFs, or I could drop things into a Word document to create a report. But maybe simplest was to print each email to PDF to preserve metadata, like timestamps and addresses. So I did that. For each relevant email, I chose Print, Save as PDF, labeling them chronologically Email 1 Alex to Laura, DF, and so forth. The photos I similarly converted into PDF pages with captions noting the original file name and date. I even checked one photo's metadata. Indeed, it had GPS coordinates embedded. I copied those coordinates into Google Maps quickly out of morbid curiosity. It pointed to an address in a neighborhood just a few miles away, presumably one of those Airbnb locations. Jesus, she hadn't even bothered to strip the metadata from the pictures she shared with him. I wondered if she was simply naive about that or if she just didn't care. Lastly, I compiled all these PDFs into one single PDF document, a dossier, as I thought of it. I gave it a bland name like Report DDF and encrypted it with a password only I would know, then copied it onto a USB flash drive I had in my desk drawer. I also emailed a copy to a new secure email I hastily created on Proton Mail as a backup stored away from any accounts she knew of. By the time I finished, it was nearing 3 a.m. I was running on fumes and adrenaline, emotionally and physically exhausted. In less than 24 hours, my entire world had been upended and laid bare in a series of digital artifacts. Part of me still hoped I would wake up and find this all a nightmare. But another part, the part of me that had meticulously gathered evidence and backed it up in triplicate, knew there was no waking up from this. It was real. Before shutting down her Mac, I took care to delete any obvious traces of what I'd done. I cleared the Mail app's cache of downloaded messages. I had saved what I needed externally anyway, and then removed her account from the Mail app to avoid any chance of a read status syncing once it went back online. I closed the browser and cleared the recent browsing history to erase the Google Takeout page and anything else that might arouse suspicion. Then I powered down the laptop and carefully placed it exactly where I found it. As I crawled into my own bed, the same bed where, I realized with a sick feeling, Laura had probably slept beside me after some of her trysts, I felt a strange calm settle over me, like the eye of a hurricane. I had the truth now, grim and devastating as it was. And with the truth on my side, I could take action. I stared into the darkness, my mind now strategizing through the hurt. One question loomed large. How would I confront her and when? My gut instinct was not to burst out in anger the moment she came home. A raw confrontation might give her a chance to lie, to gaslight, to destroy evidence or rally defenses. Maybe the old me, the one who believed in straightforward communication, would have sat her down for an honest conversation, even in the face of betrayal. But the new me, the one burned by deception, felt colder, more calculating. If she could plan and execute this double life behind my back for months, I could plan my response just as carefully. I wasn't just a husband scorned. I was also a manager, someone who dealt with crises methodically. This was now a crisis to manage, one with potentially huge stakes. My children's future, my assets, my pride. Lying there in the silent pre-dawn gloom, I decided I wouldn't let rage dictate my next move. I would be patient. I would think this through from all angles and strike when the time was right, in a way that secured what mattered to me. Laura had no idea what was coming, and I took a grim sort of satisfaction in knowing that for now, she was oblivious while I was fully aware. The power dynamic had flipped silently in the night. With that thought, I finally closed my eyes. My heart still ached, and a part of me was screaming in pain deep inside, but I hushed it with plans of action. Tomorrow, there would be time enough for grief or fury. Tonight, I needed a little rest to gather my strength for the battle ahead. Chapter 5. Psychological Game. Laura returned from her Palo Alto trip late Thursday night. I'd had a full day to steel myself, and when I heard her key in the door around 10 p.m., I made sure my face revealed nothing. I was sitting in the living room, half reading a report from work and half listening for her arrival. The kids were already asleep upstairs, thanks to an early dinner and a bribe of extra bedtime stories to wear them out. "Hey," Laura called softly as she entered, wheeling her small suitcase in behind her. She looked travel-weary, but she flashed me a tired smile. "You're still up?" "Yeah, wanted to make sure you got home okay," I said evenly, closing the report and standing. She came over and gave me a quick hug. I forced myself to return it, careful to control the tension in my muscles. Up close, I could smell her perfume mixed with the sterile scent of air travel. I wondered if she had seen him during this trip, but pushed the thought aside. Palo Alto was far enough that I doubted it. "How were the meetings?" I asked, stepping back. She sighed, dropping onto the couch. "Long, but I think it went well. They'll let us know in a week or two. I'm just glad to be home." She looked up at me with a warm, grateful expression. "Thanks for holding down the fort with the kids." "No problem. They missed you," I said. The lie came out smoothly. In truth, the kids hadn't particularly noticed her one-night absence beyond asking, "Where's Mommy?" at bedtime. I had answered that Mommy was on a work trip and would be back tomorrow. Ethan wanted to video call her to say goodnight, but I'd told him it was too late. I didn't want to talk to her more than necessary while I was still processing my next steps. Laura leaned her head against the couch cushion and closed her eyes. I miss them too. And you? She added softly. I didn't respond to that. Instead, I asked, want some tea or anything? Or are you heading to bed? She opened her eyes at my tone, polite but distant. I might just crash. I'm beat. She studied me for a second as if trying to read my mood. You okay? You seem quiet. I forced a small smile. Just tired myself. Long day. It wasn't a complete lie. I was running on a few hours of sleep and a lot of stress. She nodded, accepting the explanation. All right, let's go up. In bed, she fell asleep almost immediately. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling in the dark, feeling the subtle distance between our bodies. Usually after a trip, even a short one, she might scoot over and cuddle against me. That night, she didn't, and I certainly didn't initiate anything. Perhaps she sensed something was off, or perhaps she was simply exhausted. Friday morning, the masquerade continued. We slipped back into routine, getting the kids fed and ready. I played the part of the mildly bleary but otherwise normal husband, and she, the slightly jet-lagged wife catching up on a day missed at the office. If anything, I was quieter than usual, but morning chaos with toddlers provides plenty of cover for lack of real conversation. She left for work with a kiss on my cheek. I tolerated it, kissing her back lightly. There was a time such a routine gesture would make me feel warm. Now it took all my self-control not to recoil. When her car pulled out of the driveway, I watched it disappear down the street and felt a steely resolve harden in my chest. It was time. At my own office later that morning, I closed my door under the pretense of needing to make conference calls and set about executing the first phase of my plan. I logged into our joint online banking portal. We had a sizable savings account that was technically joint, but largely funded by my pre-marriage assets. The down payment for our house had come from an inheritance I received, which was one reason I'd insisted on a prenup in the first place. According to the prenup, either of us was allowed to move funds from joint accounts to personal accounts, as long as we provided written notice to the other party. It was an unusual clause, meant to ensure transparency and prevent either of us from being blindsided by a cleaned-out account in the event of a separation. Ironically, I was about to use it for exactly that purpose. I initiated a transfer of roughly 80% of our joint savings into an account under my name only. I left some money behind in the joint account so it wouldn't be completely empty, enough for upcoming bills or any small emergencies, to avoid technical default on automatic payments. The transfer was large, tens of thousands of dollars. My heart thudded as I confirmed it, but I felt no hesitation. That money was effectively mine, and I wasn't going to leave it within her easy reach. Next, I went to our credit card accounts. We had two shared cards, the Amex and a Visa, both of which we were co-signers on. I changed the passwords on the online logins for each. That wouldn't prevent her from using the physical cards immediately, but it would prevent her from accessing statements or making online transactions until she sorted it out with the bank. If needed, I could report the cards lost and get new ones issued solely in my name, but that step I'd save for later if things escalated further. For now, I just wanted to send a message and secure the finances. Finally, I composed the notification email. I addressed it to her personal Gmail and CC'd her work email for good measure, with the subject line, Notice of Funds Transfer per Prenuptial Agreement. My language was formal and brief. Dear Laura, this email serves as official notice that I have transferred $85,000 from our joint savings account ending in 3441 to my personal savings account ending in 8931, pursuant to Section 3.2 of our prenuptial agreement dated June 3, 2016, which permits transfers of joint funds to individual accounts with written notice. Additionally, I have changed the passwords to our joint credit card accounts for security purposes. You will need to contact me directly for access or reset requests. Sincerely, Mark. I read it over twice. It was dry, almost corporate in tone. Perfect. It said everything and nothing. Nowhere did I hint at why I was doing this. Let her draw her own conclusions. The correct one being that I was onto her, though I wasn't going to say it outright. Not yet. With a deep breath, I hit send. For a moment, I just sat there in my quiet office, the air conditioner humming above, and the distant sound of phones ringing down the hall. I imagined her at her own desk, hearing the ping of an incoming email, maybe glancing at it during a break between meetings. Would she open it right away? Would she see the subject line on a phone notification first? I didn't have to imagine for long. Less than 15 minutes later, my cell phone lit up with her face as she does. A call from Laura. I let it ring. My heart was pounding, but I wanted her to sweat a little. She didn't leave a voicemail. Instead, a flurry of texts followed. Laura, Mark, I just saw a notice about funds. What is this? Why did you move money? Laura, is something wrong? Please call me. Laura, Mark? Each message bubbled onto the screen in real time. I turned off the phone's ringer and placed it face down on my desk. I wasn't ready to talk to her. The notification email explicitly said she should contact me, which she was now desperately trying to do, but I had no intention of giving her the reassurance of a conversation. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and returned to actual work for a while. Or tried to. My concentration was shot. Adrenaline was coursing through me, making my hands a bit unsteady on the keyboard. Still, I answered a few emails, reviewed a project plan, wrote tasks to appear normal to anyone on the outside. Inside, I was on edge, thinking of Laura's likely reaction. Around lunchtime, my desk phone rang. The landline that only internal calls usually came through on. I glanced at the number. It was reception. Mark Warren, I answered, trying to sound composed. Mr. Warren, hi, came the hesitant voice of our front desk assistant. Your wife is here in the lobby. She's asking to see you. She says it's urgent. I closed my eyes briefly. Damn, I hadn't expected she'd actually leave work and come find me in person, at least not this soon. That meant she was really panicking. All right, thank you, I said calmly. I'll be right down. I took a moment to collect myself after hanging up. This wasn't ideal. I had hoped to delay any face-to-face confrontation until I had all my chess pieces in place, and certainly not in my workplace. But perhaps this could still play to my advantage. If I remained composed and gave nothing away, it might only deepen her anxiety and confusion. I walked into the lobby a couple of minutes later. Laura was standing off to the side, arms crossed tightly, her posture rigid. She looked small and out of place in the sterile corporate lobby of the energy company where I worked. All marble floors and chrome accents. I noticed she had driven straight here from her office. She had driven straight from her office and was still in her work clothes. When she saw me, she uncrossed her arms and took a step forward. Her face was a mix of worry and irritation. Mark, what the hell is going on? She hissed, keeping her voice low but intense. There were a couple of people sitting in the lobby waiting, and the receptionist nearby pretended not to listen. I gave a polite professional smile, the kind I'd give to a client, and gestured toward the seating area by the window, away from prying ears. Let's talk over here. She followed, eyes darting over my face as if searching for clues. We sat down on a leather bench. I maintained a neutral expression. I got your email, she began, matching my low volume. And then I saw the transfer alert from the bank. Why would you do this? For security purposes? What does that even mean? Why now, out of nowhere? Despite her controlled tone, I could see the pulse in her neck beating rapidly. She was trying to keep it together. I clasped my hands in my lap. It means exactly what it says, Laura. I've moved the money into a secure account under my name. I've changed the passwords on accounts that I feel need additional security. As for why, well, I believe our prenup allows me to do so at my discretion, as long as I notify you, which I did. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Mark, that doesn't answer anything. Did something happen? Did you get hacked? Or are we in some kind of financial trouble I don't know about? Her attempt to find an innocent explanation might have been almost touching if I didn't already know it was an act. I wondered if she truly thought I might not know about her betrayal yet. If she believed I was just randomly locking down money for some other reason. No hacks, no financial emergency, I said coolly. I let that hang, then added, consider it a reallocation of resources and a precaution. A precaution against what? She demanded, a bit of heat seeping into her whisper. Her eyes were wide now, and I could see genuine fear behind them. She was running through possibilities and maybe, just maybe, suspecting the real reason. I simply looked back at her, keeping my gaze steady and cold. Look, I'm not doing this here. We'll talk at home later. I stood up, indicating the conversation was over. Right now, I have to get back to work. She looked up at me, shock and hurt contorting her features. I could tell she wasn't used to me shutting her down so curtly. Normally, I was the accommodating one, always ready to talk things through. Not today. I cut her off quietly. We're not doing this here. We can talk at home later. I stood up, indicating the conversation was over. As I walked away, she called softly, "Mark, please." But I kept going, forcing myself not to look back. The moment I was out of the lobby and in the empty hallway to the elevators, I exhaled. Shakily. My hands were tingling with adrenaline. I couldn't believe I'd just done that. Effectively stonewalled my wife as she sat nearly in tears. It was cruel, perhaps. But a part of me also felt a grim satisfaction. The psychological game was working. She was off balance, scared, and searching for answers. Good. That state of desperation would keep her from taking decisive action of her own. She wouldn't know how to respond because she didn't fully understand what she was responding to. And in that window of confusion, I would carry out the rest of my plan. Back in my office, I peeked through the blinds to see the parking lot. I watched as a few minutes later, Laura emerged from the building. She moved quickly to her car, digging for her keys. Even from a distance, I could sense her agitation in the way she walked. She sat in the driver's seat for a moment, and I wondered if she was crying or just trying to compose herself. Then the car started and she drove off. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Phase 1 was complete. It hurt, yes. It had taken all my willpower to remain cold in front of her. But seeing her distress also strangely validated my own. She wasn't getting away with it, not scot-free. There would be consequences for the pain she caused me, even if she didn't yet know the full extent of what was coming. As I sat back down at my desk, I glanced at the time. I still had an afternoon's worth of actual work to get through somehow, but after that, I would begin phase 2. A rather more direct hit to something she cherished almost as much as our bank balance, her career. Chapter 6. Blow to her career. The following week, I set the next phase of my plan into motion. By now, the atmosphere at home had grown palpably tense. After the incident at my office, Laura tiptoed around me that evening and the days after, clearly unsure how to breach the chasm that had opened between us. I kept interactions civil but minimal, retreating into work or childcare duties, leaving her to stew in uncertainty. She didn't dare bring up the money transfer or my cryptic words at the office again, likely hoping I'd volunteer an explanation when I was ready. I didn't. Instead, I focused on delivering the coup de grace to something that mattered immensely to her, her job. Late Tuesday night, once Laura was asleep, I sat at my home computer in the study. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic tick of the wall clock and the occasional sigh from the baby monitor. On the screen in front of me was an anonymous Proton mail account I had set up under a fake name. In the draft email, I had written and refined a carefully worded message to the HR department of Laura's company. I read it one more time before sending, "To whom it may concern, it has come to my attention that one of your employees, Laura W.S. product manager, has been engaging in unethical conduct that may be of concern to the company. Specifically, there is evidence that on multiple occasions when Laura claimed to be on business trips or working remotely, she was in fact using that time for personal activities unrelated to company business. Some of these instances involved misrepresentation of her whereabouts, potentially falsifying expense reports, or misuse of company time. I have attached documentation, including time-stamped photographs with location data and copies of personal correspondence that support these claims. For example, on March 3rd, while records may show she was on a work trip to Los Angeles, she was actually in Sacramento. See attached photo March 3 PNG with geolocation metadata. Similarly, on June 7th, an evening she reported as a client dinner, she spent the night at a rental property for personal purposes. See June Airbnb receipt.idf and corresponding photo. These are just 2 instances among several. This information suggests possible violations of company policy regarding honesty, use of company time, and expense reporting. I believe the leadership team would want to be aware of this behavior, given the trust and responsibility placed in her as a product manager. My intention in sharing this is to ensure the company isn't unknowingly being taken advantage of. I prefer to remain anonymous, but the evidence should speak for itself. Regards, a concerned party. I had agonized over the tone. It needed to sound concerned and professional, not vindictive. The examples I cited were directly drawn from the dossier I'd compiled. I made sure to attach only what was necessary to make the point. A couple of damning photographs with the metadata showing location and date, a PDF of an Airbnb receipt showing her name and the date overlapping with a claimed work event, and an excerpt of an expense report email I found in her archives that clearly didn't match up with where she truly was. I omitted the more salacious images. HR didn't need to see her in bed with Alex to figure out the implication. It was enough to show she lied about where she was and what she was doing on company time. Before hitting send, I used a VPN to route my connection through a random location. I wasn't sure how tech-savvy her startup's HR or IT were, but I wasn't taking chances on this being traced back to me. The Proton Mail would mask my identity, and the VPN would cloak my home IP address. With everything set, I clicked send. The email whooshed off into the ether at 1 a.m. I sat there for a few moments afterward, hands clenched, feeling both anxious and satisfied. This was the riskiest part of my plan. Unlike the finances, which I had every legal right to manipulate, sending anonymous accusations to her employer was a more ambiguous territory. I rationalized it. Everything I sent was the truth, backed by evidence. What they did with it was up to them. If her actions violated company policy, and I was certain they did, most companies frown on falsifying work records and essentially getting paid while playing hooky. Then, any consequences were on her. That night I slept lightly, wondering how long it would take for the fallout to hit. I got my answer by the end of the week. On Friday afternoon, I was leaving a meeting at my own job when I saw a text from Laura. Need to work late, something came up. Can you get the kids from my mom's? I smirked at my phone. Something came up was putting it mildly, I suspected. If my timing was right, HR at her company would have received and reviewed the dossier midweek. Perhaps today they had confronted her or taken action. I texted back a simple okay and pocketed the phone, heart thumping with anticipation. I picked up the kids as requested. Apparently she'd dropped them at her mother's earlier that morning, maybe anticipating she'd be tied up. Her mom gave me a questioning look when I came to collect them, likely sensing something was off. But I just told her Laura was stuck at work and thanked her for watching the kids. That evening, I fed the children, got them settled with a cartoon, and waited. It wasn't until close to 9 p.m. that Laura's car pulled into the driveway. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I heard the garage door close and her footsteps in the mudroom. I was in the kitchen rinsing dishes. She walked in with heavy steps. One look at her, and I could tell she'd been through the ringer. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral as I placed a plate in the dishwasher. She opened her mouth, then glanced toward the living room where the kids were giggling at the TV. She visibly swallowed whatever she was about to say and instead managed, "Hi," in a hoarse voice. "How was work?" I asked, as if nothing was amiss. Laura gave a slight shake of her head, like she couldn't believe my casual tone. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Mark, we need to talk." I closed the dishwasher and wiped my hands on a towel. "Okay, let's talk." She glanced again at the kids. "Upstairs," she muttered. "Fine." I followed her up the stairs. On the way, I quickly said, "Ethan, keep an eye on your sister for a few minutes, all right? Mommy and I will be right back." Ethan, engrossed in the cartoon, just nodded absently. In our bedroom, Laura shut the door softly. She turned to face me, arms hugging herself. For a moment, she just looked at me, her expression a tumult of emotions. Fear, anger, desperation. Someone had clearly pressed the panic button on her world today. I simply waited, my face impassive. If she was expecting me to open this conversation, she'd be disappointed. Finally, she spoke, voice trembling despite evident effort to steady it. Something happened at work." I raised my eyebrows slightly, feigning concern. "Oh?" She inhaled shakily. "I was pulled into HR this afternoon. They said they'd received an anonymous report about me lying on travel reports and personal photos and stuff." Her voice cracked on that last part. I maintained a mask of surprise. "Anonymous report? Wow." Her eyes flashed. She caught the tinge of artificiality in my response. "Cut the crap, Mark." she snapped, voice low and harsh. It was you. Who else could it be? Who else would do something like that? I didn't answer immediately. Part of me wanted to keep playing dumb, but that ship had sailed. She knew. And frankly, seeing her like this, exposed and furious and frightened, I was done pretending. I tilted my head regarding her. What exactly do you think I did? I asked quietly. Her nostrils flared. Don't play games. You sent HR those photos, the emails. God, do you realize you could have gotten me fired? They had an emergency board meeting about me. I'm barred from access to the project systems while they investigate. I've been pulled off all my projects, effective immediately. Her voice was rising, and tears were welling in her eyes now. Mark, my boss wouldn't even look me in the eye. They asked me to hand in my corporate laptop pending a review. Do you understand what you've done? I felt a cold satisfaction at how rattled she was, but I kept my own voice measured. I understand that your company takes dishonesty seriously, as they should. She stared at me in disbelief, a tear spilling over. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? You're my husband. Why would you try to destroy my career? That word, husband, hanging between us, almost made me laugh. Instead, my own anger, long held in check, finally simmered to the surface in a controlled boil. I didn't destroy anything, Laura. You did. I just revealed what was already there. Her face went pale, except for twin spots of red blooming on her cheeks. What was already there? She repeated. You mean you spying on me? Digging through my private emails? That's what was there, you violating my privacy, twisting things. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Twisting? There was no need to twist. The facts speak for themselves. You lied to your company multiple times. Treated your work trips like personal getaways. That's on you. She wiped at her cheek angrily. We both know this isn't about work, she shot back. This is about us. About... She stopped herself, pressing her lips together as if forcing the word back, but it came out anyway, barely a breath. Alex. Hearing his name spoken aloud in our bedroom, the bedroom we once shared happily, made my jaw tighten. I stepped closer, keeping a careful grip on my composure. So you do have the guts to say his name. That's progress. She winced. Mark, I was going to tell you, Don't, I interrupted, holding up a hand. Don't insult me with more lies. Were you going to tell me before or after you were done sleeping with him? After you drained our bank account to fund your little rendezvous? Or maybe after he got bored and moved on to the next married woman? She sucked in a breath like I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that, she said, voice breaking. You don't understand. You're right, I said coldly. I don't understand. I don't understand how the woman I loved, the mother of my children, could systematically betray and deceive me for months. I don't understand how you could come home, look me in the eye, pretend everything was fine, and then go have fun with your yoga instructor in a rented room at the first opportunity. My words lashed out more harshly than I'd intended, but I couldn't. Hold them back now. Anger and hurt that I dammed up poured out in a hard whisper. Laura covered her mouth with a trembling hand, tears spilling freely now. I'm sorry, she choked. I'm so sorry, Mark. It was a mistake. Stop. I cut her off sharply. A mistake is something you do once, maybe twice, and regret. You made choices, repeated choices. You orchestrated an entire double life, so no, you're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. She shook her head frantically. No, that's not true. I was ending it. I was going to end it, I swear. It just got out of hand. I gave a hollow, humorless laugh. Out of hand? That's one way to put it. Well, things are definitely out of your hands now. She took a tentative step towards me, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I stepped back and she halted, dropping her hand. I know you're hurt, she whispered. You have every right to be. What I did was unforgivable. But Mark, please. The kids, our life, don't do this. Don't burn everything down. We can find a way. I felt a surge of incredulity. You think I'm the one burning everything down? Laura, the fire started with you. I'm just making sure I don't get consumed in the flames. Her face crumpled. She sank onto the edge of the bed, shoulders shaking. Please, don't take the kids from me, she sobbed quietly. Don't take my job. I'll do anything. For a moment, I just watched her cry, a part of me detached and analyzing. This was a side of Laura I had never seen, defeated, pleading. The strong, confident woman who managed teams and balanced our family schedule was reduced to this. and it was largely her own doing, but I had undeniably pushed the knife in. There was a flicker of pity somewhere inside me, but I quelled it. I couldn't afford pity. Not now. I sat down in the armchair by the window, keeping distance between us. I spoke softly but firmly. I've already contacted a divorce attorney, and I'll be filing for divorce. She looked up, stricken, though not surprised. Mark, I will be filing for divorce, I continued. We have a prenup, and you know what that means given what's happened. The house, the savings, they're protected. They're mine. And I'm going to seek primary custody of the children. She sobbed into her hands. How can you be so cruel? She whimpered. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But the kids, my career, everything. I stood up, feeling a weary finality settle over me. Cruel? I echoed. You want cruel? Cruel is cheating on your spouse and putting your whole family at risk. Cruel is making me doubt every moment of our lives for the past year. I'm not doing anything to you that you didn't bring on yourself. I'm just making sure that when the dust settles, I'm not the one left with nothing. She looked up at me with swollen eyes, about to speak, but a small cry from down the hall interrupted her. Emma. The commotion must have woken her. I turned toward the door. Compose yourself, I said quietly. We're not done, but the children don't need to see this. I walked out, leaving Laura trembling on the bed, and went to tend to our daughter. When I returned a few minutes later with a sleepy Emma in my arms, Laura was gone from the bedroom. I heard the sound of the guest room door down the hall clicking shut. So she had removed herself, perhaps realizing she couldn't face me any longer that night. Fine by me. I gently placed Emma back in her crib and soothed her until she fell asleep again. My heart ached as I watched our little girl's peaceful face, knowing that the world she knew, of mommy and daddy together, was about to shatter. There was nothing I could do about that now. All I could do was pick up the pieces and try to rebuild something stable for her and Ethan, without Laura. I stepped out into the hallway. The guest room door remained closed. Behind it, I imagined, Laura was crying into a pillow to muffle the sound. I stood there for a moment, tempted to say something, to maybe offer a shred of comfort out of sheer habit. But I had none left to give. Instead, I turned off the hallway light and went downstairs to sleep on the couch, alone with my thoughts and the hollow victory I had won in this round of our conflict. Chapter 7. Court and Division of Property. 3 months later, I found myself in a downtown Sacramento courtroom, standing at a mahogany table next to my attorney. Across from us, at the other table, sat Laura and her attorney. The air was cool, the room mostly empty save for a court reporter and a judge presiding over our divorce hearing. It was the final step in legalizing the collapse of our marriage. By this point, the initial shock and fury had settled into a kind of resigned resolve in me. I was here to ensure the future for myself and the kids, and I wasn't going to waver. The proceedings were mercifully swift. Our prenuptial agreement, signed years ago in sunnier times, dictated much of the outcome. My attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Cynthia, presented the relevant sections to the judge, clauses outlining the division of assets and custody arrangements in the event of infidelity. Yes, we had a fidelity clause. At the time we signed it, I remember we both laughed about how we'd never need something so archaic and dramatic. Yet I'd insisted, half in jest, half out of an abundance of caution, learned from watching a messy parental divorce in my youth. Now that little-noticed clause was proving decisive. Judge Harmon, a gray-haired man with a no-nonsense demeanor, peered over the documents at Laura. Mrs. Warren, he said, his tone formal, according to the terms of this prenuptial agreement and the evidence submitted, it appears you have breached the fidelity clause. Is that correct? Laura's lawyer placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a silent urge to respond. She had been mostly silent throughout the hearing, letting her counsel do the talking. I dared a glance at her. She looked drawn and pale, a far cry from the confident professional she once was. She barely met my eyes these days. Now, in court, she cleared her throat. Her voice came out soft and strained. Yes, Your Honor. A simple admission, but it landed heavily in the courtroom. Even now, hearing her acknowledge it publicly made my chest tighten. The judge nodded and turned his attention back to the paperwork. Very well. The prenup outlines the distribution of assets under these circumstances. Let's review. We have agreed. Warren Warren's request for primary custody. We are simply asking that visitation be liberal and that no disparagement clauses be included regarding either parent. I glanced at Laura in surprise. Or maybe she genuinely believed the kids would be better off primarily with me. I wasn't sure. We hadn't spoken directly except through lawyers since that night of our confrontation. Judge Harmon made a few notes. Very well. As both parties have reached an understanding on custody, the court will honor that agreement. Mr. Warren shall have primary physical custody of the minor children, with Mrs. Warren granted reasonable visitation as agreed upon in the parenting plan. Jointly, I would have the marital home, as listed in the agreement, remains Mr. Warren's separate property, since the down payment and title were solely from his premarital assets. He glanced at Laura. Mrs. Warren, you're aware this means you will have no claim to the house? Laura nodded faintly, eyes on her hands. Yes, Your Honor. I felt a mix of triumph and sadness. The townhouse would remain mine, the kids' home, as I'd wanted. But it also meant Laura would be truly moving out of the life we built there. The joint savings account, Judge Harmon went on, is to be divided in accordance with the prenup stipulation. It states, Warren, you preemptively executed that transfer. Cynthia spoke smoothly. My client acted within the terms of the agreement, Your Honor. Notice was given. We've documented that. Yes, the judge said, riffling through pages. I see that. In fact, it appears the court's intervention on asset division is mostly moot, since the funds have already been allocated to separate accounts per the prenup's formula. Laura's lawyer added quietly, We are not contesting the asset division. You were honor. We acknowledge she still. Divorces are always unfortunate, especially when children are involved. But it is good to see that, despite the circumstances, you have managed to reach agreements without protracted litigation. He then addressed Laura directly, his tone not unkind. Mrs. Warren, the evidence provided and your own admission leave little doubt as to the cause of this marriage's breakdown. While the decisions today ensure their home and routine will be preserved with their father, and that you will still play a significant role in their lives through visitation and joint decision-making. How you rebuild trust with them and with yourself is something you'll have to work on outside this courtroom. Laura's eyes were shiny with tears as she murmured, Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. The judge nodded, then finally looked to me. Mr. Warren, custody and the home are being granted to you as requested. I trust you will facilitate a healthy relationship between the children and their mother and keep their best interests at heart. Yes, Your Honor, I replied, my voice firm. That is all. I wish you. I glanced as I walked chapter in the I had kept. Yet the more so that I recount the values or lack of values we practice in our personal lives inevitably influence our professional reputation. I wrote about trust as the currency of both healthy relationships and successful careers. How betraying trust at home can indicate a willingness to cut corners or deceive elsewhere, whether one realizes it or not. And it wasn't a vindictive piece. I wasn't interested in publicly shaming Laura or airing dirty laundry. Instead, I took a measured, almost analytical tone, my manager's voice dissecting a case study of risk management gone wrong. Many were company finances. Some commenters applauded the courage it took to candidly discuss such a topic, noting that it's often the unspoken issue in discussions about leadership and ethics. Many readers speculated about the real-life inspiration behind the story, sharing their sympathy for whoever the wronged party was. In the meeting where I was offered the job, my boss mentioned that my level-headed handling of personal crisis and the insight in that article were part of why they felt confident in my leadership. The LinkedIn post continued to circulate for a while, popping up in industry newsletters and even being referenced in an article about ethics in a popular business magazine. I kept a printout of it in my desk drawer. Not as I wasn't chapter in the morning. It was both. At first, Ethan would ask almost daily why mommy couldn't come back home. And each time I'd soothe him with a hug and repeat that sometimes parents stay friends but can't live together. I made sure those transitions were smooth. Backpacks packed, favorite stuffed animals remembered, wanting to keep their world as stable as possible. As for me, I poured my energy into the two pillars of my life now, my kids and my career. Work was the analytical approach and steadiness I'd shown during my personal crisis seemed to translate well into leadership. I was calmer under pressure, decisive when problems arose, and empathetic with my team members when they faced their own personal struggles. It had human. The irony wasn't lost on me, my private heartbreak fueling professional development materials, but I took it in stride. If anything, it felt good to channel what I learned into guiding principles for others. At home, the absence of Laura was both strange and oddly peaceful. I missed the idea of the intact family we once had, the shared laughter over dinner, the tag team approach to bedtime when neither of us was too tired. But I didn't miss the tension, the worry, the nagging sense of something being wrong that had hung over those last months of our marriage. In our home now, there was honesty and calm. The kids and I created our own little traditions. Friday movie nights with popcorn on the couch, Sunday morning pancake experiments. Ethan loved adding food coloring to the batter, resulting in crazy blue or green pancakes. Laura's, I could tell it meant the hall. For now, chapter. Curious, I opened it while sorting through the day's mail at the kitchen counter. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded into thirds. As I unfolded it, a smaller Polaroid photo slipped out and fluttered onto the counter. I picked it up first. The photo, he looked, the woman, the note, I found you, the man, he said, when I it appeared. Mark, by exposing the affair when you did, and in the manner you did, you not only protected yourself, you inadvertently saved many others. Alex's operation is collapsing. Other women he targeted and their spouses have come forward. Authority, I won't say, I hope this letter brings you some closure. Perhaps since, in hindsight, it explained a lot. The calculated way he pursued Laura, the expensive Yoga Pass Pro sessions, likely a front for funneling money, the deliberate photos. She had been a pawn in a far bigger scheme than either of us realized. I sank onto a stool, the letter and photo laid out before me. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. Vindication that the man who blew apart my marriage was far more nefarious than just a charming playboy. He was a criminal, and now the world knew it. And so I still in a how much devastation lay hidden behind that captured smile. Eventually, I folded the letter back up and slipped it, along with the photo, into the envelope. I locked them in my desk drawer, unsure what I would do with them. Perhaps one day, when enough time had passed, I would share this with Laura. If only to let her know that she wasn't the only one fooled, that the shame she carried shouldn't all be on her shoulders. But not yet. For now, it was enough that I knew. As I what I had Ethan kneeling down, I admired their wobbly rock castle and joined in their play. My heart full. I had my children, my integrity, and a future to look forward to. And as I helped place a pebble atop our little makeshift castle, I realized that, through all the chaos and heartbreak, I had regained something essential, my sense of self, tempered and resilient. The past was finally at rest, and whatever came next, I was ready. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.